So I want to talk about that it's time for feminine bias. And it is something that I have been thinking about for a very long time. Because I've been working in the field of helping women and girls be empowered economically for, 25, 30 years. And while you've heard about all the progress we've made, I think the other thing that's really driving me a little crazy is how long it's taking. Right? We feel like we keep reaching these goals and think now it'll be what we want, and it just sort of gets there, sort of halfway or whatever, because we really are looking at a situation where, we've done all this work, all these changes have taken place, and we're only 15% of corporate CEOs, 17% of board members. And the thing I was looking at preparing to make these remarks is that I think it takes until 2056 for women in the United States to make pay that's equal to men. So 2056 is when they're projecting that there will be pay equity. And at the same time, almost in the same time period, 2050 is when all kinds of folks predict that 50% of the world will have very little water left. So I look at that and very cynically say, well, by the time we have equal pay, we're going to be spending all our money on water. Which is, if you think about it. And what that's driven me to really think about is, what does equality mean? And what has it delivered for us? And I want to first say that I am all for all the laws that have been passed so that we can do whatever we want to do. So that we can own property, so that we can vote, so we can, business credit in our own name, all of those things. But we have those and have had them. And I'm increasingly convinced that we've confused equality with conformity. That we are so busy trying to fit into a system that we did not design, but we've lost our way a little bit, and we've also lost our edge. So I want to show you sort of what my life experience has been, particularly as it relates to empowering women and girls, to help you appreciate how I've come to this understanding that we need to be more uniquely for ourselves and to be very clear about what our value is. So the first thing I want to show you is this was the first picture that we put out there. It was the first presentation that we made to corporations to get them to support Take Our Daughters to Work Day. And I have always loved this little girl. There is something about her laughter, but also her curiosity. There are a lot of things in that photo that have stayed with me since the day we found it. Because I believe, and I know most of you do as well, that girls learn everything from watching us. Everything. This little girl, this is 20 years ago, 22 years ago. So she's 30 now. What has she learned from us now, and what is she doing? Because one of the things that became very clear to me in Take Our Daughters to Work Day was there was this euphoric moment when people first arrived at workplaces on the very first day of Take Our Daughters to Work Day. There was more feminine energy in most workplaces than there had ever been. I heard reports from people at Goldman Sachs that there were the most females ever on the partners floor on Take Our Daughters to Work Day because all the partners had brought their daughters to work. My interest in designing and creating Take Our Daughters to Work was to really help girls appreciate what their future was, but to help the current employers, teachers, and parents appreciate who was going to be in the workforce in the future. Who was that going to be? It was going to be us. We're now over 50% of the workforce. And yet, we still don't make equal pay. Fascinating, isn't it? Because the other thing that struck me, and that has stayed with me also, was from the moment we announced Take Our Daughters to Work Day, there wasn't a report. I spent more time talking about boys than I ever did talking about girls. All reporters felt obliged to ask what would happen to the boys. An 8-hour period in a year dedicated to focusing on girls was hard to fathom. So hard to fathom, in fact, that 10 years after we created Take Our Daughters to Work Day, it became Take Our Daughters and Sons to Work Day. And I don't point it out with any anger, any whatever, but just to point out that we live in a male-biased culture. Just do. We just do. Who's been in charge that long? Who's made the rules? It's not a criticism, it's just a fact. So here we have all those little girls running around, learning about how to be judges, how to be, run a fire department, how to, run a corporation, and things started to change immediately. I will never forget the story of these girls. They were 11, and they went with somebody who worked at a big insurance company, and they brought the girls into the boardroom to see what was going on. And the girls are listening. They're 11 years old. And there's a discussion going on. It's a health insurance company about how much money they have invested in tobacco companies. And there's a discussion, and they decide to go ahead. And of course, one of the little girls, after the meeting, is talking to her mother or father and asks, and says, that kind of doesn't make sense to me, that a healthcare company would be investing money in cigarettes after you've told me how bad cigarettes are for your health. Out of the mouths of babes, that company a year later stopped investing in tobacco companies. Because there was a recognition with the sort of pointing out from the girls that this might not be the best thing to be doing. So we saw a lot of things, but the focus on what about the boys, to the point where, because we wanted the boys to understand what was going on, we designed a whole curriculum for boys. It was called What About the Boys? And it explained to them the whole history of women, and when we got the right to vote, and how long that took, and we couldn't own property, we couldn't get divorced, we couldn't even lay claim to our own children, and how that's changed, and when that changed, and that it was very important that your classmates got to see, what they would be doing, and they also learned different skills for themselves. But it was something that the press never really picked up on. What they picked up on was that this was for girls, and what happened to the boys, even though it's a joyous occasion. So this issue of bias is there. And how do we take being pro ourselves and each other and the world, because I operate with a purpose, and I would imagine all of you do as well. I have a life purpose. And if you don't have one, pick one. But my life purpose is to leave the planet. I think there's a lot of people, leave the planet safe enough and abundant enough for our children, our grandchildren, and their children's children. I do that, I live that, by empowering women to really imagine and build and design the lives that they want through entrepreneurship and business. That's how I do it. There are many ways to do that, and I think there are many people committed to that same purpose and vision as mine. Because in the end, what are we leaving for the next generation? What are we leaving for her? Whoever she is in your life. So that was my experience with Take Our Daughters to Work Day. And it led me to really think about women's role in the economy. Because an awful lot of little girls during Take Our Daughters to Work Day, they write to us, that big 7-year-old writing, "My mommy handles a lot of money." And you couldn't figure out whether mommy was handling a lot of money as a cashier in a grocery store or mommy was an investment banker, but anyway, the girls noticed that she handled a lot of money. And it was a general theme of sort of discovering outside of the home what what her relationship was with money and all those things. And over the course of a number of years, it led me to really start to think about why women don't make more money. Again, now that the laws are in place and you can't discriminate against us in employment, why was it that we weren't making more money? And also started to come to the conclusion that one of the ways to deal with the challenges of fitting into a place that was never designed with us in mind. It was never designed with people who were primarily responsible for the raising of children, the caring of parents, the preparation of food, all those things. How did we fit into this system that was designed for someone who had somebody at home to take care of all that? And I think we still struggle with that. Because again, we're conforming to a system that wasn't designed for us. So I create this organization called Count Me In and a program called Make Mine $1 Million Business. All of these women, with the exception of 2, now have multi-million-dollar businesses. This picture was taken in 2007. They live all over the United States. They're in every sector you can imagine. And I bring this picture, the significance of them is that out of the 8.5 million women in the United States who own a business, 75% are at $50,000 a year in annual gross revenue. 75%. We won the right to business credit in our own name in the United States in 1974. We owned 5% of all businesses. Now we own close to 40% of all business. So we get the business ownership is a way for us to be more ourselves and to create something that we want to see in the marketplace, but we have kept it really small. So I looked at the census statistics with some people in my office and some sponsors we were working with, and got that only 2.8% of women-owned businesses were at $1 million or more in revenue. So we decided, rather than continuing the wonderful work that was going on in microenterprise, which is a very important breakthrough in the field of poverty alleviation, economic empowerment, but it was all, and continues to be for the most part, all anybody's doing in this arena. And there's this growing group of women in what's called the missing middle who get beyond microenterprise a tad. There are 1.6 million women business owners who are past 50,000 in revenue in the United States. They're in between 50 and a million, 1.6 million of them. So we're moving along, but again, at a glacier's pace. So we create this program that literally says what it means. We're going to, make you a $1 million business. Some of these women are now at 20 million, 10 million, 5 million, 6 million, 2 million. One went out of business, and one continues to struggle with a product that you just, can't get right. But it's an extraordinary achievement, and what it convinced me of was that we can do this. If there was any doubt, there are 1 million men at $1 million in the United States, and 240,000 in the US. So that's the disparity. So we decided to have a campaign that would get 1 million women to $1 million. Puts $1 trillion into the economy and creates 4 million new jobs. And it's been going along, but it is also slow. And in the course of doing this, we've had extraordinary interaction with a lot of major corporations who have supported our efforts to varying degrees. And what we've learned a lot about is how to get into the supply chain where you can grow a bigger and bigger business. And it's kind of counterintuitive to this notion of fitting in, to conforming to a system so that you can be considered equal. I've also noticed working with women in the military, where if you think about those numbers, where you're 15% of this huge force of people that is all based on maleness, you manage a life there by fitting in and not drawing attention to the fact that you're female, or drawing less attention to the fact that you're female. Where in fact, to excel in business, to get into that supply chain, you have to stand out as unique. I sit on a committee at Walmart that is working to spend $20 billion with women-owned companies in the next 5 years. $20 billion with women suppliers in the next 5 years. And they're making all kinds of videos to put on their website to help people understand the process of getting a meeting with a buyer and doing all that stuff. And the thing that they keep saying, and forget the gender for a moment, if you want a space on the shelf of the most valuable retail real estate in the world, you have to be different. You can't bring the same thing and say, I want you to take so-and-so's product off the shelf and put mine there. Just because, I'm me. And it's as good as what you got there now. For somebody that exists in the supply chain, if you've got something as good as what's there now, why should I change it? Why should I change it? So the question is, how do we express and make clear our value and what our values are, given that we spend, and I've seen numbers anywhere from 12 trillion to 20 trillion, but that's how much we're spending in the global marketplace every year. Women are spending. And I think the question is increasingly not what do we want, it's what do we want to make? What do we want to sell? How do we want to change the system? Because we are the ultimate supply chain. Think about it, ladies. We are supplying the earth with the future. I mean, let's just, really. We are. We are the ultimate supply chain. It's not going to go on without us. And yet here we are conforming to something that in some cases has done very well by us. This is not a us and them situation. It is a challenge to us because I think the world needs help. You know, because at the same time, that just stays in my mind. We're going to have equal pay and there's going to be no water for 50% of the population. Are we going to wait till then to fully activate who we are and what we bring to the marketplace? Or are we going to prepare for that now by creating businesses, organizations, movements that are going to make sure those places that are headed to 50% of the 50% who aren't going to have any water, and that includes, I mean, just so we're clear, it includes California, it includes New Mexico, it includes Colorado, it includes South Dakota. This is not somewhere else. This is here and everywhere else. So if we're the ultimate supply chain, what have we laid down is the ultimate value chain? Because some companies call it a supply chain, other ones call it a value chain. And I would argue that we have not fully defined our value chain and been clear with ourselves what it is that we bring to the marketplace and to the world, and also been clear about what we want for our families and the future. And what I've seen in all of these meetings with all of these big companies as they support more women growing bigger businesses is they're kind of waiting for us. In this moment, if you think about how much money we spend every week, every day, every year, trillions, and how that happens is in the most dynamic place now, where it used to be that we went to the store, now we're doing it online, and you have all of these choices. And it's going to shake out at some point as to how we like to do this the most. How do we want to influence that other than by shopping in the way that we're gonna, whichever's easiest for us, whatever we like the most? You know, I happen to still like going to the grocery store, but I don't like doing any other kind of shopping. But how do we influence that? So that's what I keep feeling, that it is time for us to assert our value chain. What is that? What do we value? What do we value the most? When women are asked, because in doing Make Mine a Million, I've been astounded at the number of women who come to me very quietly and say, Nell, this is a really great program, but it's not for me. And I look at them and I say, why is that? I'm really not ready to be a millionaire. And I explain to them that if they get to $1 million in business, they won't be a millionaire, so relax. Take you a while at $1 million a year in revenue to be a millionaire, so why don't we practice? But clearly, some of our reactions to power and money have to do with the reaction to how it has been wielded against us. And how do we construct a value chain where it is put in its proper place, where we can, because everybody that I know that gets successful in the women's space, and I think this is true of some men as well, but there are women, they hit $100,000, $200,000 in gross revenue, they want to set up a foundation. And while as somebody who's coaching them on how to grow a bigger business, I sort of hesitate and go, could you wait a minute till you actually have some employees, On the other hand, you want to encourage that, because I think it increases our comfort level with being successful and making more money and making the world a better place to live. because I believe there's a way to do business at any level and subscribe to the values that I believe most women have, and an awful lot of men too. I'm not saying we are the only ones that have values, but I think men have been put into a system and put into a harness where I don't know how often they get to question the values, since we are in the process of creating this for ourselves. And it's why I also think business ownership, I don't think it's a panacea, but I think it allows us to try some things that we can't necessarily do. You know, has anybody heard the women from SoulCycle talk about how they've structured their training program and how they bring in employees and what they think of their customers? If every woman-owned business, if every business took care of their customers in that way and trained their employees in that way, we would be operating in a very different marketplace. So those are the opportunities I see that we bring. Now this is the future. This is the future. These are my 3 nieces. Cute as can be, right? What do women always want at some point? We want power, we want money, and we want pink. And they're still in their pink. Right? 2050 is what, 37 years from now? 2050 is 37 years from now, so you know they'll be like 40-something. They happen to live in Colorado and New Mexico, so they're going to be out of water. I've written in the book I wrote, Stepping Out of Line, about one of them being sort of like a water specialist in the future. But I think my question to all of us is, what are we doing right now so that they will be prepared? And whatever that means, if we come to the conclusion that people have to move out of those places, whatever the decision is that we start to influence and make about how we're going to handle these things, what are we doing? What are we doing to make sure that they move into a world where their children will be able to go on? And that we won't be having these kind of conversations. So the 3 things that I think help us start to live with feminine bias are, first and foremost, I think everybody's probably seen the Bourne Legacy, the latest, Bourne movie. But there's a moment in that movie where they are walking into a room to stop some horrible biological disaster from happening. And Rachel Weisz is the character, the doctor, who is the person who's made this stuff, and she knows how to stop it or turn it on or whatever. And they're walking into a place that is totally hostile. And they're sneaking in to go get some formula and turn off the computer and make sure they don't use it, and to obliterate a whole portion of the population, whatever the theme of the movie was. There's something like that. And she's terrified to go in the room. And the Bourne guy looks at her and says, "Act like you belong here." And she is able to walk in, do what she has to do, and walk out. And he has to leave her to go take care of something else. And all he says is just, "Act like you belong." And whether we feel that or not, because I think there is so much we can learn from men, and one of them is to fake it till you make it. Really, act like you belong there. The second is to stop self-censorship. How often do we close our mouth in meetings, in discussions, or whatever, because we have a sense of what would be better for us, or wonder if they've looked at it from our perspective? And I got to tell you, I'm not a whiner. We got to do this in a way where it's positive for everybody, but have they thought about what 80% of their customers might think of that dumb idea? And I have to edit out the dumb idea. But there are so many things that I hear. Since I created Take Your Daughters to Work Day, every major company periodically comes to me and shows me like packaging or something and say, "Do I think women will buy this?" 50% of it in the 1990s looked like a Tampax box. They knew we bought those, so they figured if they put everything in those colors and that kind of shape, we might buy that. And I'm talking about financial packages. I'm talking about everything. How about that lovely light blue and green? Would you buy that? So stop self-censorship. Because we think this notion, it's the same notion of trusting your guts. You know when you're looking at a bad boyfriend. You know this story and you keep going for it. It's like, stop. And say so. I'm not doing this because. Cute as you are, can't go there. Whatever it is. So stop the self-censorship. And really focus on bringing all that you are to everything that you do. Because this notion of holding back at all, leaves us in kind of a strange place. Where we're getting some of what we want. Have we asked for everything that we want? When only 1 in 3 women ever ask for a raise. Do you know that? 1 in 3. How are we ever going to get beyond this? Most of us don't think about what it would be like if we designed the world that we live in. What would happen if women designed the world that we live in? How would it be different? And not in reaction to the existing world, what would we like to see? And I believe we will get there if we start to think about it with feminine bias. Thank you very much.